Probably.
Probably.
We'll allow you to address the board, Mr. Fisher, and then we'll respond. It's your
Okay.
turn to-
Well, basically what I was going to say was this, okay? I was asking for updates, and if you didn't have any, I was going to ask if a right to know would get me any additional updates to the file with regard to any citations, communications with the property owner, which is Mr. James Vlahos, the former commissioner here. Next thing I was going to do is, pass out, because I have a question, there's been some issues as to what you should or shouldn't do. If you could just pass those down, Sharon, if you don't mind. This is nothing more than a copy of a field report, which you've seen before, that's dated December of '07. And if I could just read, it's very brief, if I could read it to you, it's signed off on by a Carl Badman, and it says very specifically, inspected site improvements, paved extra spaces as allowed by plans. And I have the land development plan in my hand, along with your resolution 698. Ed, and I was just wondering, is there another plan? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, you asked me a question.
No, this basically says paved extra spaces allowed by the plan. So my question to Ed was going to be, is there another plan? Because the land development plan, that basically was dated, if I'm not mistaken, May of '07, and then you have a resolution that was signed in February of '07, doesn't allow for additional macadam parking spaces unless certain other provisions apply, and I don't think those provisions basically are anywhere in the file that I'm aware of. And those provisions were, basically consent from the township upon getting off-site drainage rights, which means easements. And I don't think there was any easements. So that being said, if Bursick Engineering has another plan that we don't know about, did I not get that, or what's going on?
You have everything I gave you the file.
Then it would appear to me that Bursick, the engineers back then, totally misread the plans. And in doing so, I think, the township, up to this point, has expended, you had mentioned you spent 80, 90 hours, Ed?
Probably.
We've been working on this for 6 months, approximately. So as far as I'm concerned, you spent legal fees, trying to get this thing all done. Why should the taxpayers pay for that? The culprit here isn't the township, isn't me, okay? Quite frankly, if Bursick had done what they were supposed to do back then and put in the grass papers, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you tonight. And you guys wouldn't have spent the money and the time, and neither have I, trying to investigate all this problem. So the liability falls on two people, I think. One is the developer, which is Vlahos, and two is Bursick, the engineer. I mean, we've got to have an engineer around here that can read plans properly and communicate it to whoever they got to communicate it to. So I was going to basically say that, Bruce. Additionally, the next comments I was going to make, as I mentioned, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this before you talk, but as I mentioned before, if you're sitting up here, you guys should all be held to a higher standard when it comes to filing out financial statements of interest and so on and so forth. And with the length of time that it's taken to get here, and I appreciate all your work, Bruce, and comments, and your work as well. And I know government kind of moves slow at times. I'm getting older, I'm getting less impatient as I'm getting older. But basically, one of the things that I noticed and I questioned was, Chuck Garner basically conflicted himself out because he represents me on unrelated matters, and you appointed Stephen Kalis, as the person to advise you on this. And from an outsider looking in, okay, it looks as if maybe there's a conflict there because if I'm not mistaken, he's the solicitor on your sewer authority. Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Mr. Vlahos is still a representative of the sewer authority. Now, there's a little bit of a conflict there, some people might think. Now, I'm not saying that he's not being partial or impartial. This doesn't look good. With that being said, I don't really have a whole lot more to say other than, I'd be more than happy to hear what you have to say, Bruce.
Well,
Because
we discussed this, and I'll go ahead at this time turn it over to our solicitor.
Okay.
Because we do have some answers for you.
Okay.
Mr. Fisher, first of all, I would say that to the extent you believe there's information you don't have, it might be appropriate to file a right-to-know request, and you may find that there's some additional information that now is in the file that is based upon the township's investigation of your complaints. With respect to that, based upon your complaints and concerns, the township has undertaken its due diligence to investigate your assertions related to the development process for 1954 East High Street that occurred nearly a decade ago. To the extent there were deficiencies or aspects of the project not in compliance with the approved plan or then current regulations, the township staff is now satisfied that those issues have been addressed and properly resolved. The township appreciates your bringing this to our attention and considers the matter to be closed. I've also received a copy of a letter. I guess your attorney, Richard Curley, had provided a copy to Mr. Wagner. Based upon one of the sentences in that letter, and I'm going to read that, it says, "In addition, I note that my client has certain remedies under the cited statute and other law with respect to obtaining relief from the township, but I am hopeful that we will not need to avail ourselves of these remedies." While I'll admit that statement seems rather cryptic in my opinion, I interpret that as a threat to take the township into some type of litigation.
Okay.
Based upon that statement your attorney made and provided to Mr. Wagner, I've instructed my client not to communicate with you
Okay.
directly
Okay.
anymore, and suggest that your attorney communicate with either Mr. Callis, whoever is required to represent the township in
That's
this
fine.
matter. So we believe we've addressed the issues. Certainly you have your rights to pursue whatever you feel is
That's fine.
appropriate, and again, we thank you for bringing this issue to our attention.
One last question, if I may ask.
You may ask, I'm not sure we'll
You
respond.
probably won't respond. But as part of that land development plan, in addition to the water runoff issues, okay, there was also parking relief that was granted for the development of that property on the top 2 floors. How do you add 2,000 or 1,500 square feet of improved space without getting additional parking? When you've already granted relief on the 4,000 feet that you already had?
And
Is that
again,
something that we're not gonna answer
I will
because-
reiterate my comment if you would.
I've got legal, I've
I'd like
got
to know
lawyered up,
requests,
so,
and feel free to make those requests, and you're free to
Okay.
agree or disagree with what the township has determined to be appropriate.
so the file wasn't necessarily closed, it's just you're not gonna communicate with me since I've lawyered up.
Well,
Pretty much so.
you've heard what we said.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other